Good evening, Erev Tov, and good day to all our friends wherever you are. My name is Ruby Shamir, and I'm the Executive Director of AIFL, America-Israel Friendship League in Israel. I'm happy to host you on this webinar focusing on ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People, formerly the Museum of the Diaspora. The AIFL is hosting webinars on different topics twice a week. We actually have hosted already over 90 webinars since COVID started. Back to the museum. The Museum of the Diaspora was opened in 1978. Its creation was the vision of Dr. Nahum Goldman, who was the president of the World Jewish Congress. The museum is located on Tel Aviv University campus. When it was opened, I was a student at Tel Aviv University, and I remember the excitement around the opening. Last week, more than 30 years later, I visited ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People, and was very impressed by its great development. I am sure this webinar will make you visit the museum when you are next in Israel. I would like now to introduce my co-host, my friend Shula Bahat, CEO of Beit Hatfutsot of America. Shula, before you start, I'd want to introduce also Wayne Firestone, the Executive Director of AIFL in the US, who is going to moderate this webinar. Shula, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Ruby, for your friendship and generous introduction, and you, Wayne, for bringing the America-Israel Friendship League to the ANU Museum of the Jewish People. I have known the League since its inception and admire its steadfast commitment to highlight and strengthen the bonds between the US and Israel and instill the love for Israel in people of all backgrounds all over the world. This virtual tour marks the beginning of a wonderful partnership of our two organizations. The mission of our museum is to tell the exceptional and continuing story of the Jewish people through a variety of platforms, of which the new core exhibition is the center. We tell that narrative most comprehensively, and the foundational connection of the Jewish people to Israel is an integral part of that narrative. The experience of a people living among other peoples for millennia, sustaining their identity and core values, contributing magnificently to the general society in every arena, is most powerful in its universal meaning and resonance. The museum is a world-class cultural entity, the largest of its kind in the world. It has transformed millions of people worldwide since its establishment 43 years ago. It is now my great pleasure to introduce you to my colleague, the CEO of ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People. Dan Tadmor, a gentleman and an officer, is a person of vision, values, and knowledge, who was at the helm of the outstanding team of creative people that re-envisioned and brought to a glorious fruition a strategic plan that recognized the need to reimagine the narrative of the Jewish people for generations to come. The project was completed on budget and on time, and the outcome is the content-rich and visually stunning museum you're about to see. Thank you and enjoy your tour.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shula. And let me just add a couple of words of introduction to Dan, because there are a lot of us today that I think are just giddy with excitement about the opening of the museum and being a part of this sneak preview today to get just a taste of it, of what we have in store for us. But there's probably no one more giddy than Dan Tadmor. Dan has been the CEO of Beit Hatfutsot and the Museum of the Jewish People since 2012. There are many people already writing in from around the world in the chat about seeing the first buildings going up in construction back in 1970s. There are people who have toured the Tel Aviv campus as students, like myself and Ruby working there. We love this facility. And when I say we, I mean ANU. I mean the entire Jewish people loves this incredible institution, which we feel is our institution. It tells our story. And the idea of sort of renewing that and taking to the next level requires someone who understands storytelling. And our two panelists today, Dan Tadmor and Dr. Orit Shaham Gover, who I'm introduced after Dan, are people who are professionals in telling stories. Dan comes from the Israel broadcast industry and has a storied career as a CEO, working with a number of media operations as an executive. That includes the Tel Ad broadcast channels, the CEO of Channel 24, 24, and one of the subsidiaries of Yediot Achronot, Yediot Shirot. So, Dan, how excited are you? And give us a few words by way of introduction.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you, the America-Israel Friendship League, for graciously hosting us this evening. Jonathan Barsaid, Ruby Shamir, thank you so much for this opportunity. So how excited am I? On a scale of 1 to 10, we're at 11. Working very hard because we're opening the doors to the new museum this Wednesday. So you're literally getting you will be getting a sneak preview of the new museum just before it opens to the public. This is the culmination of over a decade of work. The museum first opened in the 70s, in 1978. And it was a world-class museum. It was a must-stop for everyone. It was cutting edge, but museums age. And there came a time when we needed to reimagine it. From the point that you realize you need renewal to actually realizing it, it takes a while. And it took us over a decade and about $100 million to finally realize the dream, which is the largest and most comprehensive museum of its kind in the world. We're talking about over 72,000 square feet of exhibition space. We did it in 2 stages. The much smaller stage about 5 years ago, we opened a new wing, and now we're tripling in size. We're more than tripling in size. And we're opening the Museum of the Jewish People. And so a new museum deserves a new name. The Museum of the Jewish People now is going to be known as Anu, literally meaning we, us. It fits in with our mission. It fits in with what we do. Beit Hatfutsot had always been a mouthful for Americans anyway. There's at the bottom of my screen, there's a speech to text thing. So when somebody said Beit Hatfutsot, the speech to text said Bigfoot. So that gives you an idea but it runs deeper than that. We may touch on the topic in the conversation later on, but the whole terminology of galut and tfutsot reflects the conversation of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and it's really no longer relevant. And of course, technologically, the museum needed a complete overhaul. And yes, we literally shut it down and did it all over again. And so as circumstances allow, we would love to have everybody who's on this wonderful broadcast come visit the museum. Until that's possible, what we're going to do now is just give you a sneak peek of the museum's wings and the ideas that we wanted to bring out through the museum. So the story has always been and will always be the unique and ongoing story of the Jewish people. But the way we tell it in 2021 is different than the way it was told in 1978, not only technologically, but also thematically. Our curator, Dr. Orit Shaham Gover, will elaborate more about that. So I think, it's time to watch some videos, I think.
Well, we're excited to have such an incredible docent, as it were, the chief curator of the museum, who's with us today and has had a rough job choosing what goes in and what maybe stays for another day. And I know you all have put an incredible amount of thought into not only the name, but to every piece that will be in there. You have not only a skilled curator and storyteller who has played this role, but someone who knows museums throughout Israel, has worked on, Dr. Gover has worked on museums at the Masada historical site. She's worked at Herodium. She's worked on the Begin Museum, and she's previously worked at Beit Hatfutsot and understands the very essence and the importance of this museum and the unique contribution it is making, not only in the language that we will speak and understanding and breathing life into Anu, but of the needs of the Jewish community today, the different voices that need to be heard. So we're grateful to have Dr. Gover as our virtual tour guide today. And why don't you start? I know we're beginning with some segments that you will introduce that will give people a visual orientation to the physical layout of the new museum space. So let me turn over to you to talk about, before we get to those videos, what principles you were trying to breathe into the entire museum.
Yes, thank you, and good day to everyone. I must add to what Dan said that this was a big challenge and lots of work, sometimes frustrating, but most of the time I felt very lucky to be able to be part of such a huge and wonderful project that tells one of the most fascinating stories in the world. So I'd like to start with some of the thinking behind the museum. The conceptual design of the museum consists of 3 pillars. The first pillar is a pluralistic approach. We are committed to present and represent the magnificent mosaic of the Jewish groups and subgroups, cultures and subcultures throughout history. The second pillar is the celebration of life and culture. We decided to give up the victim position and look back into the sides of the Jewish story and find lots of prosperity, ingenuity, creativity, and not just expulsions, persecutions, and killings. We don't ignore atrocities, of course, but we give them different balance. In other words, instead of looking back and saying Gewalt, we look back and in many cases say hallelujah. And the third pillar is identification. We wish that every visitor, Jew or non-Jew, will be able to identify with this story and tell himself or herself that this story is also mine. So these 3 conceptual pillars were the reason why we construct the museum story backwards. So out of the museum's 4 wings that span over 3 floors, the first wing, the mosaic, is dedicated to the vibrant and rich life of the Jewish people today. It highlights Jewish contribution to arts and culture, including theater and dance, music, cinema, folklore, and of course, humor. The tapestry of various Jewish denominations and the contribution of Jews to humanity all present an abundance of individual and collective Jewish identities and cultures. So we can now see a short film about this wing. So the next is the historical wing, the journey, where we encounter the unique and ongoing story of the Jewish people, beginning in antiquity and extending to our day, the flourishing state of Israel, and dynamic Jewish life throughout the world. Let's see the other one. the third wing, the foundations, presents the conceptual foundations that are the backbone of Jewish existence. Foundations that are both uniquely Jewish and commonly universal. Here we encounter Judeo-Christian values and their foundational role, and the Bible and its underlying concept of liberty and justice, as well as its omnipresence in our language, folklore, art, and culture. The last wing, Hallelujah, the Synagogue Hall, focuses on the evolution of the synagogue as an institution, beginning with the temple in Jerusalem through to the present. 21 synagogue models from various locations and eras tell the story of Jewish assembly, worship, and study, while films and interactive depict various forms of congregation. And the film.
Well, this definitely looks like no surprise that when we all get back to Israel, that one of our destinations that needs to be on the map is this incredible museum. The 4 floors itself looks like, the 4 wings rather, are filled with content that could engage. And I want to just ask people now in the audience, just so we have some time to parse through them, please feel free to share your questions and comments. The ET doll seems to have stood out as an icon that captured everybody's attention right away, and obviously part of the narrative of modern Jewish history in a way that maybe many people don't immediately understand why that's part of the narrative. So maybe, Orit, you could share a little bit about your thoughts in as you were starting to choose and think about what would stay in and what would be different about the museum. What were some of those difficult decisions that you had to make to decide to include a Spielberg icon of Hollywood as part of this exhibit?
Well, as we saw, the first wing is about identity and culture today. Now, there is a big question, is it a Jewish culture or Jews in culture? But my personal belief is that everybody comes from somewhere and have some background of parents and grandparents and some traditions that are part of his creativity and creations. And though Spielberg did a film about an alien, actually, but maybe his ability to feel what does it mean to be different than the rest of the people around him could make this film that great. We leave those questions open. We decided that our discussion about Jewish culture today is a discussion that leaves an open question, and we give many answers because many people on site, on the exhibition relate to those questions when we get some very interesting comments and answers, but it's about having many answers. Some related to the Talmud and the fact that Jews always argue and need to reflect, and reflecting and debating is more important than having answers. Some say it's about how we gather and congregate. Everybody have his own answer, and it's great because dealing with identity and culture today means that we accept all kinds of ideas.
The questions are just flooding in, so I'm going to try to get to a couple more of them before we move on to the next aspect of the tour. Not surprisingly, someone asked about the Genealogical Center. For so many of us, this was a first time that we actually started thinking about our own names and our own family stories. Is there some continuity to that particular project? Let me ask that question.
Yeah, so I'm going to take that one. So the museum databases, actually there are 5 extensive databases. Genealogy is just one of 5. There's genealogy, family names, communities, photographs, and music. So 5 databases that for the past about a decade we've been digitizing and working in order to make them accessible online. And so the good news is that most of the material is now accessible online. You no longer need to come to the museum. You can, it's available online at no charge. You can go to the museum website and you can find the stuff there. The bad news is mine, because I discovered in this process that it's never ending. And in terms of resources, making things available is just the beginning. It's a technological issue. There are legal issues sometimes involved, but the biggest challenge is the user interface. So when you go into these databases, how do we do a good enough job in making relevant results available to the user, right? Some of it has to do with collaboration with other institutions. You, the user, really don't care where the information is coming from. And so we actively promote collaboration with other organizations in order to serve as much information to the user. But part of it has to do with what's referred to as the UX, or the user experience, and the algorithms that run in the background. And every time I say a word like UX or algorithms, imagine the ringing of dollars, because it really is a very, very resource-rich endeavor. But we're not straying from making it available at no charge, and we will invest whatever it takes in order for all of these databases to make them available.
Dan, that's a phenomenal way to really think about how do you leverage the physical space and what can only be done there, and what are the opportunities of an institution today that can actually broadcast and create access to content, even with something like this today. Let me try to piggyback one more question to get in before we jump. We have a question, 2 different sides of the coin. Norma wants to know about the extensive collections of photos, Yizkor books, etc., testimony from disappeared Jewish communities in Europe. Is there still a way to access that? And the other side of the coin, Shep wants to know, is there are there glimpses of newly emerged Jewish communities that we've learned about from Uganda, Madagascar, in China, the more recent experiences of Jewish communities? Will we be able to access some glimpses of those narratives as well?
Well,
do you want to take that one, and I'll help you if you need to?
I'll take the second one. You'll take the first one. But I'll start with the second one. Yes, we have a project that we started 3 years ago. It went into the exhibition, but it's an ongoing project. It's called com.unity. in which we invite all kinds of communities to join us, and through special forms. It's kind of social media form, and send us information about the community. We put it into our online and then in the museum. So some of those communities did approach us, and we have some of them, and we invite each and every one that feel that he relates to any community, and community can be anything from JCC synagogue to the motorcycles of Virginia, or the, let's say, drivers in Brooklyn. Everybody is invited, and then they will find themselves in the museum. They will be part of the vibrant, lively Jewish people of today.
Yeah, and regarding the first question, we've redone the museum. Now, this is something that I want to underscore. A museum is a means to an end. An exhibition is a means to an end. And the new museum tells the story using modern forms of expression. By the way, one thing that we introduced, the old museum was famous for having no original objects. It was all made of replicas. Whenever you saw something, it was a replica. It was not an original. The founders of Beit Hatfutsot were very forward-thinking and out of the box in doing that back in the 70s. This time around, we're introducing objects, but we're not creating a collection in the vaults. We're not collecting stuff. We're not hoarding stuff. We're only taking stuff that we want to show. So the objects that you'll see, there are hundreds and hundreds of objects in the museum, but only ones that serve the story. Now, in redoing the museum, some of the things were retained, mainly 11 exquisite dioramas. Those who have visited the museum remember that we have dioramas of exceptional scenes from Jewish history. So all of those were renewed and are installed in the new museum. But a lot of the other stuff simply disintegrated in our hands when we came in to redo the museum. And whatever didn't is kept in storage.
Well, we know that there's not only a lot of material that people are going to encounter, but in addition to walking through the museum and experiencing it in person, there are three themes or three principles that you've interwoven regardless of where you are in the museum. And so I know we have three segments that I want to make sure we get to. Orit, do you want to introduce the first one on just looking at those fantastic pictures of young people and old people and interacting with the content in ways that are going to be very engaging. I know you guys were very careful in ensuring that this was not about gadgets or the latest technology, but that the focus remained on the stories you wanted to tell. But can you share, maybe introduce this first segment on interaction about your thoughts on how to utilize the technology but not make it about the technology?
Yeah, as Dan said before, technology and object, everything is a means to an end to tell a story. We have 21 interactives in the museums. Some of them are databases. Some of them are some playing engagement. Some of them are stories. The whole idea of different tools in a museum is because each and every one of us consume information and data differently. Some needs to feel more, some need to use their heads or their ears or their eyes. Some even read, not too many, unfortunately, but some people still read. So we give each and every one of the visitors something that he can relate to and he would like to do more. So the interactives have all kinds of play ways to actually get to information. So let's see the film.
Great.
Our new museum has over 20 cutting-edge interactive display areas that help us illuminate the story of the Jewish people. Visitors are invited to cook with the best Jewish chefs, collaborate in creating an original work of art at the culture table, actively learn about the Talmud, or simply navigate the endless universe of prominent Jews and their contributions to humankind. The options are endless, and they're all at your fingertips.
Okay, that's the first principle. The second, Orit, you started to discuss this earlier about culture and how one thinks about Jewish culture, and I know this was one of the most hotly debated topics. How do you think the museum relates to culture throughout the various exhibits?
There are different ways. The first one in the first wing, it's about culture, identity and culture today. But then in every eras of all the displays of the historic wing, the journey, when we go from antiquity to medieval to early modern to the modern era, one of the major thing we show is about culture. So we deal with the golden age in Sfarad, in Spain, and we have the culture of the Talmud in antiquity, and then we talk about all kinds of first printings in the history in early modern, and so on and so forth. But a culture is a big theme that goes all across the museums in all the displays. Then we also have a film about it.
Great, we'll show that now.
A huge section of the museum is dedicated to Jewish culture in all its magnificent forms and facets, as well as the extraordinary individuals who have made such outstanding contributions to it. We look at television and film, including everything from Bollywood to Hollywood, through dance and theater, literature and art. Not to mention music, which takes us from lullabies to rock, from classical to liturgical, from the Gershwin brothers to the Al-Kuwaiti brothers. And as long as we're talking brothers, the Marx brothers and other Jewish heroes of comedy are obviously represented too.
Yeah, I just want to pause on that one. We had a question from Mark and some others about how representative the museum is, and what efforts you have taken to be inclusive beyond just Eurocentric culture. And I know you've given a lot of thought to that, both from the name as well as what you included. Orit, what was your methodology or approach to ensure that the museum would have this broad representation?
Well, the first methodology was to learn all the Jewish cultures and learn who are the cultural heroes of many places. Because some of us were born and live in Western culture, but others were born and lived in other cultures. And they have their own heroes, we have our heroes, and the thing is the balance. How you put the Al-Kuwaiti brothers next to the Gershwin brothers and show the Al-Kuwaiti Joza, which is the Arabic violin, next to notes by Erwin Berlin of White Christmas, and all of them next to David Buzaglo, who was a poet and a singer in Morocco. So we tried to step aside from where we came from in order to include more cultures that I must say, at the beginning, I wasn't familiar with. But that was the great thing about this museum. I had the opportunity to learn so much. And yes, we had a lot of deliberations about balance between, let's say, East and West.
Great. And that brings us to the third segment. And again, I'll try to circle back to a number of the questions in the chat. We'll try to reach as many as we can. We have them coming in from Facebook. We have them coming in from Zoom and from other live channels. Tell us about the heroes. You know, one of the things that museums can do that I think is important at this time that the news can't always do is remind us of what we have to be hopeful for and who are the people from our own history and past who have risen to prior challenges. One of the things that always inspired me in Israel and in this museum. So tell us a little about how you approached the heroes theme.
Well, first of all, the Jewish story is a story of people, lots of people. And we did our best to include as many as personal stories as we could. We have a couple of thousand of them. Some are more present, some are in all kinds of databases, but they are there. And actually, each and every object has a human story to it. It's not just an object. There is people's life behind it. So let's see the film and then we'll answer the questions about it because there is a lot to say about it.
Great.
And by the way, I don't see the film. Is it only in my computer?
Our history is full of countless men and women who have made unique and valuable contributions to the Jewish people and to humankind. Some are very familiar, the faces you'd expect to see at the Museum of the Jewish People. Others are less well known, and their display here in the museum is an opportunity to turn a spotlight their way. There are a variety of ways to tell the inspiring stories of these heroes, whose accomplishments took place in different eras, in different locations. So we called on the finest illustrators and animators in Israel to contribute their unique styles, techniques, and artistic interpretations to the exhibition. Some, like Moses for instance, are actually displayed in more than one version. One carryover from the old museum that I personally love, 11 exquisite dioramas depicting momentous scenes from Jewish history.
A lot was shown there, but one thing visually that certainly stands out is we have heroes and also heroines in this narrative. And tomorrow actually begins Women's History Month. And so I think it's appropriate to have a self-described feminist as well as professional curator of such a incredible global museum to share with us your vision, not only vision, but the actualization of bringing in women's voices into this incredible narrative in ways that perhaps has simply we've not succeeded in doing, to be candid, in the past.
Yeah, my favorite question, of course. It was not easy to show equally men and women in the museum, because wherever you look, not even in history, in the present, you look for the number 1, 2, 3 in all fields, you hardly find any women there. So sometimes we changed the balance. We moved forward those who may be in places 4, 5, 6. We have a special installation in the culture wing that talk about the long journey women need to do in order to become half equal, 2/3 equal during the 20th and 21st century. So we have bios of 150 women who paved the way for the sisters for change. This is in modern time. It's easier because we know those women. But in older periods, in antiquity and medieval and early modern, you can hardly find any women. Even if they were present in one century, the next century guys would try to make her oblivious. So we used a lot of research that was done in the last 30 years. It's called Her Story. And we dig from history all kinds of stories of women that nobody heard of. Some of them are in the Talmud, but in the Talmud there are so many stories. Some of them are part of modern research. And we simply put them in different ways, through art pieces, through with illustrations, through text, in all kinds of ways, just to tell everybody that visit the Museum of the Jewish People that half of its population is women, that there were women too in history. So I would say, I think this is one of the most important revolution we did in Jewish history, is to let everybody know that there were women too in there.
Well, Dan, I see we already have recommendations for books about women in your exhibit and requests for future webinars. But we also have some very practical questions that people are asking. You've got an opening on Wednesday. So you're opening not as you had probably initially planned 10 years ago during a pandemic. What precautions have you needed to take? What is opening day going to look like to ensure everybody's safety with, touch? People are asking about, can they use the touch screens on different exhibits, etc.?
Yeah. No, we did not envision an opening like this during a pandemic. Israel has a very specific regulation for museums during this period. It's called the Purple Seal, Tav Sagor. And it calls for, as I said, a 15 meter per person ratio. And then once you're in, 2 meters apart. A meter is about 3 feet, okay? So that's the distance between individuals once they're in. You're required to wipe down interactives frequently. So anything that people touch, you need to wipe down and have a lot more staff present than you would normally have. The restrictions in terms of the number of people who can enter elevators, right? So the museum was planned for people to come in, and then we have a huge 53-person elevator taking loads of people up to the 3rd floor. Can't put 53 people in an elevator right now. It's going to be, 6 or 7 people in the elevator. So we've opened another elevator and we're going to use the stairs. So we're going to have to improvise, but people need to know that it's a safe environment. We have an air conditioning system in place that replaces the air 3 times an hour, okay? So a lot of precautions that we're taking, we are hiring extra staff to make sure that everything is adhered to. If we need to nudge visitors and be sure that they're wearing their masks and that they're not huddling together, we will do that. It's challenging. Of course, it limits the number of people that can come in. It limits the number of groups that can come in. Kids have not been vaccinated. And so we're not expecting school groups in the coming weeks, okay? We need to roll with it and do the best job we can in making people, making people feel safe. No ticket sales on the premises. It's all ordered in advance. So there are a lot of complications. However, there's great anticipation from people have been waiting for this museum to reopen for a really long time. And in general, people in Israel have been waiting for museums to reopen. And there's a great thirst for culture. And so I think we'll be able to safely host many, many people, even during this challenging period.
Yeah, I think thirst is the right word, Dan, that we live for these stories. And those of us who've been fortunate to visit the museum in its different iterations have different places in our heart for those stories. We've already received a number of questions about the depictions of the models of the synagogue. So please let us know if there's somewhere for those of us who spent hours in front of those models, will we be able to see them again?
Yeah. So first of all, a lot of people are asking where the museum is located. So it's on the Tel Aviv University campus in Ramat Aviv in Tel Aviv, just off the Ayalon Highway. Regarding the synagogues, Orit, you want to answer?
Yeah, they are located in the Hallelujah, the synagogue hall. We took all the models that were in the old museum. We renovated them, we painted them, we lighted them, and gave them a magnificent gallery that tells not only the story of the buildings, but the story of what people did in there, the culture in the synagogue, and the congregation and gatherings, and the music. So we have a whole gallery for those models. And two of them we took to the new museum because they are part of a local story, but the rest of them, the whole 21, are in the gallery that was open in 2016.
Yeah, I'd like to add something. Of the 21 models that we display, 20 are Orthodox synagogues. These are classic synagogues. So whether it's 2nd century Turkey or 13th century Prague, it's an Orthodox synagogue. What we did when we put them in their own 7,000 square foot hall is that we, through media and interactive, we added about 60 more synagogues of all denominations. And so now when you enter the hall, you literally see various ways of Jews congregating, the way we've congregated through the ages, up to today's modern forms of congregation. And doing Kabbalat Shabbat on the beach in Tel Aviv or at a park in Brooklyn is Jewish congregation. So now through media, through video and interactive, that's also in the gallery. The one exception, by the way, of the models is the Bet Shalom Synagogue in Elkins Park, Philadelphia. That's the one designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. That's the conservative shul.
Wow, and it's really a great example of how technology actually aids the other value of inclusiveness. Obviously, and it relates to an interesting question that we just got here from Sandra. She asks, is there a view to the future or just to the past? How would you relate to that question? I see Orit smiling.
I know from the Bible that being a prophet after the Bible was sealed is not such a good idea. So none of us is a prophet. And I can say that we look a lot about the present, and everybody can look at the present and decide what will be the future from it. The last year taught us that you'd rather not do it. You make plans and God laugh, as they say in Yiddish. So I think we talk about the present with some look into the future and hope that things will be the way we want them. But who can promise that?
Dan, what do you think? You're smiling as well. Do you think there are clues in this exhibit about what the Jewish future will look like?
We said at the outset that we not only look at Jewish history, and I guess optimism is not the right word. You can't look backward in optimism, but that we look through a lens that celebrates Jewish identity. And I think what's baked into that is that we're totally optimistic about the Jewish future. I don't know that there's enough time to go into this, but we very much believe that the Jewish people we've never been stronger. We've never been more confident. And we very much believe that the Jewish people have a very, very clear and successful future. And I think that in choosing to celebrate the past and the present, the message is that the future, I mean, it won't happen by itself, but we very much believe in a secure future. We all need to work on making sure that we strengthen our sense of belonging, making sure that we know all there is to know about our history and culture. That's not going to happen by itself, but we're confident in that if we do that, there's a great future for the Jewish people.
So Dan and Orit, you have the pleasure during, as Shulamit says, BC, before Corona, you have the pleasure to walk onto an amazingly beautiful campus and to see the vibrancy of Tel Aviv University, student life, academic life, cultural life. How, with the new museum, have you sought to leverage your location, your interaction with that vibrant community? Can you see out to the beautiful campus, the people walking? In what ways is it a part of that university environment? A few people are asking. A few people have not, by the way, visited the museum yet.
Dan,
so first of all, can I take this one, Orit?
Yeah, sure.
So first of all, we're on a huge university campus that again, in normal times, has the organic flow of about 24,000 people a day, okay? Secondly, Tel Aviv has developed a museum mile. When you look at it, literally a mile from the Eretz Yisrael Museum through the Palmach Rabin, our museum, and across the street, the Natural History Museum. It's literally a museum mile. It looks as if it was planned. In fact, it wasn't. These are all museums that were founded in different decades, right? But there's a reason why they're all there, and that is that the north of Tel Aviv was always the place to expand, right? The center was always full. When you wanted land for a museum, you always looked north. But now what happens is that tourists, but Israelis as well, look to this area, which has very good public transportation and is very much accessible. They look to it as a destination for culture. And so the location that 42 years ago was maybe a liability, because Ramat Aviv back then was the end of the world, is very organic to the city, and in fact is a focal point for museums in Tel Aviv. Was that a good answer, Orit?
Yeah, we have a lot of students going to the cafe every day when there are students. They didn't visit the university for the past year, but usually around 1,000 of them are walking into our lobby and go to the cafe. I believe that opening the new museum will attract them to go upstairs also and look at the story, but we need to develop it.
Dan, I know you're very focused now on opening day and with the different challenges that presents, but there are a number of questions that relate to people who either may not be able to physically visit the exhibit anytime soon or be able to travel. And so do you anticipate at some point either traveling exhibits, virtual tours like this, but in greater depth on specific themes that people can, who have some of those accessibility issues, will be able to participate in the future?
Yeah. So first of all, through the years, we've always had traveling exhibitions, but the problem now is that you have nowhere to travel them to. In fact, there's a couple of our exhibitions that are now traveling the world, but they're stationary. They're not traveling anywhere. One is about Operation Finale, the capture of Eichmann, which is ending a 6-year tour of the U.S. And unfortunately, the Mossad wants its stuff back. So, based on objects that for the first time were let out by the Mossad. And the other one is about, it's called Jews of Struggle, and it's about the struggle to free the prisoners of Zion from the USSR. But all of those are not traveling anywhere right now because of restrictions. In terms of virtual tours, if you'd have asked me a year ago, when Corona just started, I was not a great believer in virtual tours. And in fact, I would still say that the way to experience a museum is to physically, it's an immersive experience. You need to be there, right? So that's the ideal way to experience a museum. However, this past year has made us all experts. I'd say the entire museum industry has moved forward light years in terms of the way that we do virtual visits. And so right now, both in terms of the technology and also the way in which we've learned to administer these tours, I think we now have the ability to provide a worthwhile experience. And in fact, we are doing more and more virtual tours. And we are going to be doing them in the near future.
Well, we're excited to hear that. Certainly, I'm going to let each of you. This has run by pretty quickly, and we didn't get to all the questions. But hopefully, it will not be the last time we get to share some of these great stories. I'm going to let each of you sort of share one vision or exciting moment for opening day that you're looking forward to people seeing when they can actually come into the facility, even with the limitations. Perhaps one thing that for you will be a signature to know that this project really has launched a new chapter for the Jewish people with its opening. So Orit, you first, something you're really looking forward for people to seeing in person for the first time on Wednesday.
I think, and that is something I thought about throughout the development of the museum, I'd like to see people smile. I'd like to see walking into the Jewish museum, we are used to cry there, and I want people to smile, to look at the culture, to look at the heroes, to listen to the music and see the films, and even look at the history and smile. I think we have a lot to smile, and this is my wish for the museum.
It's a great wish. Dan?
Look, it's a big museum, and if there's one thing that I'm certain about, a couple of things. One thing that I'm certain of is that we've made mistakes. And my great wish is that we realize where we've made mistakes. I pray that they're small, and I pray that we're agile enough to fix them quickly, okay? So that's my anxiety talking. In terms of my optimism, when you've been working in a museum for so long, the museum is not alive until it does what it's supposed to do. And what it's supposed to do is to have people in it. And so the great satisfaction, or this organism becomes, it realizes its full potential only when people are in it. And that's happening this Wednesday. So we're hugely excited.
Well, I know I have a lot of spots that I want to run to, but I can tell you right now, and I looked at a lot of the advanced materials, and when I saw Leonard Cohen perform a recording of Leonard Cohen's concert in Israel, giving the Kohen priestly blessing, and then having his guitar when he played Hallelujah at that concert being used and played by a young Ethiopian woman singer, to me, that says a lot about the success and the vision of this museum, reaching back to the depths of our sources of Jewish inspiration, showing how they have evolved over time and been interpreted by people in different countries and from different Jewish narratives and backgrounds, and making it relevant for future generations. All those things really are quite remarkable and something to be celebrated with smiles and with toasts and with the saying of Am Yisrael Chai, because it really, what this museum represents to the Jewish people is well beyond just the physical building and what is housed there, but it really does represent for the future not just a living archive of our names, of our stories, of our narratives. And I can tell you that there's a great deal of excitement and mazel tov that are in order for everyone who has worked on this opening, even with the delays and with the challenges. So we want to wish you the best of luck with that. For those of you that still have energy at the end of your day in Israel or midday here in the United States and around the world, whatever time zone you're in, you know that we do these webinars to make more friends, to put more smiles on people's faces. We do it every Wednesday and every Sunday. And we will be back with an incredible story, the Lucia Milch story, this coming Wednesday at the same regular programming time. This is a remarkable story of a survivor and a film that captures this. We will have a sister organization to Anu, Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. We will have the head of their film archives on with us for this presentation on Wednesday. So I want to leave you now, wish everybody a happy and healthy week, to Shula and Orit and to Dan. B'hatzlacha on Wednesday. Our hearts and our thoughts will be with you. You've created a great gift for all of us to come experience.
Thank you.